That one. Okay, good morning everyone and welcome. Can I just welcome everyone back to the Council Chamber? It's been a long time and a difficult time, but it's good to see us back in person. So thank you for joining us this morning. Welcome to this meeting of Development Control Committee A. And we just now need to run through some domestic arrangements, which are new domestic arrangements that we haven't heard before. Can I please ask members and everyone present to ensure that you maintain social distancing from other people in the chamber at all times and in the social areas outside? Can I ask you that you please wear a mask at all times unless you are speaking? And if you're unable to do so, that you use hand sanitizer and wipes provided. Please maintain social distancing at all times during the meeting and any breaks. Please ensure that microphones before you are muted when you're not speaking, and please do not interrupt other speakers. Members are reminded that they should not have alternative communication lines open, such as Teams chat, and that if you are contacted by a third party during an application, please bring this to attention of our legal advisor. If you are intending the meeting to speak and you persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Additionally, you will be invited to speak and ask questions by the chair of the meeting, and will be using the e-voting system for those that are able at modern.gov. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting is broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. The whole of the meeting will be recorded, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to having been recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and press may record, film or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. So I'd just like to run through some introductions. First of all, we have Ian Duprez, our legal advisor. Morning, Ian. Gemma Walker, the area planning manager. Robert Carmichael, who's our governance officer. And we have Vincent Pearce and Catherine Hale, who are the case officers. Morning. And behind me, we have our monitoring officer. Just to make sure we follow the new rules, and others here to assist with the meeting. We also have ward members at Mid-Suffolk District Council. Ward members who are on the committee may speak on an application but may not vote. And we also have Councillor Helen Geek, who's here to speak for on one of the applications. So I think on that note, we'll move on to the agenda. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence and substitutions. Do we have any, please?
Thank you, Chair. We don't have any apologies. Thank you, Chair. We do not have any apologies or substitutions. Just before we move on, I just need to run through the fire safety.
Okay, thank you.
As we're back in the building today, members. So if you hear the alarm, leave the building immediately via the fire exit and make your way to the assembly point in Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exits at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium, the ground floor areas or walkways, and if you are in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs, not the lifts, and do not re-enter the building until you are told it is safe to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so no apologies for absence. Do we need to receive any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members? No, thank you. Any declarations of lobbying? Members, yeah. Councillor. Yeah, I think we've all had that. Yeah, okay, thank you. Any declarations of personal site visits? Are there any to declare? No, thank you. Okay, so we now need to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of March 2021. Are there any points of accuracy in the minutes? If not, could I have a proposer, please? Yeah, Councillor Muller, thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Field, thank you. All those in favour to adopting those? Thank you. It was true record.
Yep, sorry, Chair, we have to do the electronic vote on that point. So, members, if you could please go to the modern.gov app and go to the plus sign in the top right-hand corner and go to the attendance/voting tab. the vote will show in a light blue colour. For members who are unable to vote through the electronic means, I will ask for your vote momentarily. So, Councillor Tim Passmore, 4. Thank you.
Fred, I'm still not logged. It's not logged me on yet. So 4.
Just waiting for one more vote, Chair. Thank you, Chair. All votes received, and that is unanimously carried. Thank you.
Okay, the minutes have been confirmed and therefore will be signed. Do we need to receive any notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the schedule of planning applications before us, and we have 2 today. First one is DC 19-02656, land south of Old Stowmarket Road in Woolpit, and we'll now hand over to the case officer to present.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission, may I remove my jacket to present? Thank you very much. Good morning, members, ladies and gentlemen. As the Chairman said, here we have an outline application in Woolpit, comprised 2 elements, extension to Woolpit Primary Academy School in terms of land and erection of 40 dwellings. It is an outline planning application and all matters are reserved. Bit of housekeeping, if I may. Anglian Water have formally not objected, so that's a bit of an update for members. The recommendation and section 106 heads of terms we will be looking at are on the correction paper that members have received. I will include a copy of that in my presentation shortly. And we will be presenting a number of amended drawings that weren't included in members' information packs. I will describe the amendments in great detail as we go through. So the paper you should be looking at in terms of the recommendation and the section 106 heads should look like that in your pack, agenda item 7A. I will go through that towards the end of the presentation so that members are fully aware of what we are expecting by way of section 106 agreement. As always, this presentation is supplementary to the report and is only meant as a visual aid. So we're looking at Woolpit, which under the adopted local plan is a local service centre. In the joint local plan, it's a core village, so we would expect development to be focused within this settlement. Woolpit Parish Council do support the proposal. So on the screen you'll see comments from December 2020 and updated comments from May 2021. On the other hand, we have Elmswell Parish Council, an adjoining parish, who do object, and their objection is based on their concern that Elmswell children may be expected to attend schools in Woolpit as a result of this and other applications. The point I need to make to members this morning is, as described by our colleagues at Suffolk County Council Education, this is a matter for Suffolk County Council and their education policy. The school in Elmswell is being expanded, but there is a finite capacity. In terms of what you're looking at today, this is not something that you should have regard to. We're looking at an application in Woolpit that provides places in Woolpit. Geographic context, here we have Woolpit flashing on the screen between Ipswich and St Ed's, adjacent to the A14. You can see Elmswell on the other side of the A14. The application site on the screen is flashing in red between the wishbone formed by Old Stowmarket Road and Heath Road. On the face of it, that appears to be a site in countryside. But of course, members who are familiar with Woolpit will recall that permission has been granted and is now under construction for the site to the north. That is being undertaken by David Wilson Homes. So this, in fact, could be considered phase 2 of a development that is underway. On the screen at the moment, you'll see the phase 1 layout, which members were very pleased with in terms of the quality of the layout. What we're looking at here in outline is the site just to the south. Officers have worked hard with the applicants to come up with a layout that actually complements the phase 1 development. And because this is an outline planning application, members will be familiar with the concept that this is an illustrative layout. I think you'll see from our recommendation, we think that it is of sufficient quality to justify a condition requiring reserved matters to be substantially in accordance with that layout. And I'll go into more detail as to why, because we have certain concerns around residential amenity, and I know that's something that local residents and the parish council have concerns over, and I think we've safeguarded the position. A closer shot. So here we have what is intended to be an extension to the primary school. Here we have open space serving the 40 dwellings. What I would say is, in terms of conditions, if members are minded to grant planning permission, I am suggesting that the area in red here, which is the school extension site, and this area in red, which is the open space, you condition to the effect that it can't be used as part of the residential site. So you would restrict residential development to the area edged yellow. My concern would be that if the school site was not required, technically it is within the red line, and I think members will want to be clear that they're not necessarily granting permission for residential development in the red areas. So that's an added safeguard that we are suggesting to members. Constraints, relatively unconstrained site. It is outside of the settlement boundary, but the report describes in detail the policy position. This is the parameter plan, and this is important because the red arrow is indicating that bungalows would be positioned in this position, and this is the area adjacent to existing dwellings that is the cause for concern locally, that there could be a risk of overlooking if the properties in that location were anything other than bungalows. Well, the applicant has agreed that they would be. They're happy for that to be conditioned to be bungalows. So that is a good safeguard. The green arrow is a pedestrian connection that comes through from the first phase. The blue dash is the vehicular access, and the orange dash is the footpath connection to the car park extension to the health centre clinic. Just a general shot. What we have here is an indicative mix drawing, and you can see that there is a broad range of accommodation. Now, I believe that Councillor Mansell and Councillor Geek are anxious to understand how that can be delivered if this is an outline application. And what I'm going to suggest in the next slide is, depending on how members feel about the layout, there are certain elements that we could control by condition. So, for example, on this slide, the overall mix is as shown on the screen. That is a mix that our own strategic housing team are comfortable with. Normally, on an outline application, if you do not condition mix, it's too late when it comes to reserved matters. So I just remind members that if mix is an issue, we should deal with that during the debate, and you decide how you want to tackle that question. The next point is, what are the story heights? Well, at the moment, we have no indication of story heights in the application. If members were thinking in this location 2 stories might be the ideal maximum, you should consider conditioning that if you are minded to grant planning permission. If you were to say no more than 3, the choice is yours, but it is something we could legitimately deal with today by way of condition. The blue edge shows exactly where the bungalows ought to be and should be, and I'm suggesting if members are minded to grant planning permission, we actually condition it so that that is the location where bungalows must be provided. We also have on this slide the location of affordable houses, and you can see that they are pepper potted. Again, we could, by conditioning the reserve matters to be in substantial accordance with the indicative drawing, actually direct the location for affordable housing at reserve matters, if that's something members wanted to do. So what about access? Well, we're going to look at pedestrian and cycle access first. The green dot on the right is a segregated footway cycleway that will be provided within phase 1. That would then extend into what we might call phase 2, which would give pedestrian and cycle access to the playing field if it was taken up by the County Council, and then on to the GP car park extension. Cars and vans and other vehicular traffic would come in through the existing access that has been created on Old Stowmarket Road to serve phase 1. So you would come down through the estate in phase 1 and simply extend into this phase. That connection does not extend into the GP car park extension. We have deliberately avoided that to ensure that the pedestrian access is unencumbered by vehicular movements. And of course, you can also get to the car park extension through that alternative route. The car park is not part of this application, but I know that it is something that is locally well received. Local people are expecting to see that car park arrive very shortly. We do have a planning application for it, and I thought it would be wise to include it so that members could see how this proposal connects to that element. There's another closer shot. So the car park would have 2 pedestrian access points, one from the east, one from the south, and obviously there will be pedestrian access to the north, but that would also be the vehicular access. So in terms of connectivity, this phase 2 element combines with phase 1 to provide really good connectivity through that site back into Woolpit, and of course the surgery and the school. Access, and you'll see on the bottom left-hand corner, that's the school extension site. That would be served potentially with a vehicular access and pedestrian cycle access if it was taken up by Suffolk County Council. That is the existing access that's been created by David Wilson Homes on Old Stowmarket Road, and that would be the point of access for this next phase if members were minded to grant permission. So let's look in more detail at the question of residential amenity, because this is the one that has the parish council and local residents are most keen to see that we've dealt with satisfactorily. So on this slide, the blue wedge is the viewing angle, and we're looking back towards Heath Road. So you can see to the left is the school, to the right is the health centre, and in the middle there are houses. Some of those are very close to the boundary. So the issue is clearly how will the amenity of those residents be impacted by development on that boundary? Well, on this slide, what we have shown is the position of the bungalows is such that they would be immediately adjacent to existing dwellings. There is no prospect of overlooking from first floor windows because there won't be any first floor windows, and we can condition and remove permitted development so that somebody couldn't then put rooms in the roof at a later date. And again, that might be something that members want to think about. So I am satisfied that we have dealt with the issue of residential amenity in terms of the risk of overlooking. That is something that the applicant has agreed as well, so there won't be any issue between us where my members might be minded to grant permission. Just so you've got an idea of what the adjacent properties look like, the photograph on the top left are the houses in the little mews to the top of the slide on the right, and then the attractive gaunt brick cottages are the Heath Road frontage. Again, there are the shots. So on the left, you see the existing fence, and you can see some of the houses on the left. Ecology, again, our colleagues at Place Services have looked at this proposal and they are satisfied with the statements that have been received so far. We are obviously going to condition ecological mitigation as a reserved matter, and members would want to see that fine detail. Were you to grant planning permission at outline stage, that would come in later. But obviously this is a connection between urban Woolpit and the rural area around it. So we have a chance to create some interesting and useful wildlife corridors, green corridors, as tendrils going out in the countryside. I know that there has been some concern locally that this rather lovely tree in the corner of the GP surgery site may be affected by this development. We are satisfied that it will not be harmed by the development. We do have tree protection condition in place. We do have arboricultural surveys in place. This tree and all the other trees to be retained would be protected in accordance with British standards. So essentially that's Heres fencing secured so that nothing can bump into dumpers and little trucks can reverse into the tree, and it avoids compaction of the soil around the trunk. In terms of Section 106 agreement, we are getting the full 35% affordable housing. There will be a contribution of 34,000 towards Cycle Link, and members familiar with the area will know the importance of the cycle and pedestrian connection between Elmswell and Woolpit. The residential scheme by Hopkins in the north of the village is providing a connection to the roundabout on the A14, and Suffolk County Council are currently looking at how that gets extended into Woolpit. We are at Elmswell, apologies. We are also securing financial contributions from developments in Elmswell to extend that link. The school transfer land would be included in the 106. There would be a financial contribution towards the cost of extended places for primary children, 184,572. That's been agreed with Suffolk County Council. We also get contributions towards secondary school transport and preschool provision. So on that basis, and with the added suggested conditions safeguarding the school transfer site and open space site, preventing it from being used for residential development as part of this permission, we are recommending to members that, subject to that 106 being satisfactorily completed, the Chief Planning Officer is able to grant conditional planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, questions from members. Yes, Councillor Passmore.
Oops. Thank you, Chairman. Just a question. You mentioned earlier about the stories, number of stories of houses. Now, I know in the middle of Woolpit there are some that are probably 3, maybe even 4 stories from what I remember. What is the general street scene in the vicinity, and also for the adjacent new development, so that we can make sure it fits, so we can therefore make a decision, please, on the number of stories, as you suggested?
Thank you, Councillor Passmore. The phase 1 is predominantly 2-storey. The prevailing character in Heath Road is 2-storey. I would suggest that 2-storey would be complementary to the existing character of this immediate locality.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Vincent, for that presentation. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. With regards to the cycle link, could you just confirm what the £34,000 will deliver? Will it deliver a cycle link actually from Woolpit all the way to Elmswell Station, or is it just part of that? Secondly, the school extension site. There's various references to it being an extension to the school, land, a playing field, and I just wanted some clarification on exactly what that land is likely to be used for. And secondly, there's already a new school site on another application in Woolpit. So why are we having a this extension site if there's already a new school site planned? And could you explain the differences there, please? And the third one, if I may, is just with regard to Woolpit neighbourhood plan. I understand it's at its closing stages, as it were, so presumably it carries reasonable weight. And if this is outside the settlement boundary, I know that Woolpit's neighbourhood plan, I understand, has got various policies in relation to that. If you could just clarify those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eburn. The first point I would make is the £34,000 contribution is just that. It is a contribution. It goes into the pot, and Suffolk County Council will help deliver the connection through to Elmswell using that money and other monies that it is collecting. So it isn't for a specific section of that path. The school extension site, you are absolutely right. The larger site in Bury Road, when granted outline planning permission, did include a site for a new primary school. We have the reserved matters for the residential element in at the moment. What Suffolk County Council asked for was this particular extension site. In the event that they needed it, I suppose as a sort of a backup plan, that if that school for whatever reason didn't happen, there would be space here to expand the primary school in Heath Road. In terms of the Section 106, we would ensure that the time available for Suffolk County Council to take up that site was sufficient for them to know what is happening to the new site off Bury Road to the north. So if it wasn't required, then clearly it wouldn't be a school extension site. Suffolk County Council wouldn't take up that option because the new school would have been provided. In terms of the neighbourhood plan, you are absolutely right, Councillor Eburn, to say that the Woolpit neighbourhood plan is reaching its end point in terms of the referendum. We have a policy in there, WPT2, which sets out criteria for development. You'll recall that actual allocations were removed from the neighbourhood plan, but WPT2 actually provides us with the criteria. This scheme satisfies the criteria for development, even though it is outside of the village envelope. WPT5 was the policy for this site, but you'll recall the inspector commented on that and said the fact that it had been taken out, along with all the other allocations, does not preclude Suffolk County Council from reserving this for school purposes, and it doesn't preclude planning permission being granted for development. So in terms of why is this site acceptable if it is outside of the settlement boundary, it is a site that was taken out, but actually in terms of the tests, the normal tests for sustainable development, it fits all of those. It is adjacent to existing development, it is adjacent to the settlement boundary, it is adjacent to a significant development that is currently under construction. We are satisfied that it doesn't pose any issues within the MPPF and doesn't present any unfortunate precedents for development outside of settlement boundaries in other villages. And we are comforted by knowing that the parish council do support this proposal. It's something that they have backed for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to come back?
Thank you. Yes, if I may come back. So just to be absolutely clear, we may not need that extension for the school, and we will know that in a year, 2 years time. And if we don't need it, will it just become a space, a wild open space for the use of villagers and so on, or will it just become an extra bit of playing field? So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eburn. That is right. Suffolk County Council, as the education authority, will decide whether they need it or not in due course. If they don't require it because the new school has come on stream, it would revert back to the landowner as agricultural land. What we're doing is, with the suggested condition, is in safeguarding the position that it couldn't come back under the outline as residential development. In terms of what is reasonable, in the planning sense. If it is currently agricultural land, remaining agricultural land is perfectly acceptable. But we have safeguarded the position because nobody wants residential development through the back door. If in due course somebody did want to use it for residential, it would have to come in as an application and you would judge it on its merits at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got several, but if I could just deal with two. The Place Services Ecology, page 22, if looking at the detailed papers on page 80, they do reference their submission on October 2019, but I couldn't find that in the papers, so I was wondering what that actually had to say. And the other one was regarding that tree that you highlighted of particular value. Can we guarantee that there will not be underground utilities taken within the tree protection area, please? I'm aware of an unfortunate other example recently where that did happen.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. If I take your second point first, that is a very good point, and it is something we can control by condition. I would suggest something along the lines of service runs have to be agreed with the local planning authority where these could prejudice the retention of trees. In that way, if somebody wanted to dig a trench right past that tree, we would at least have some influence to say, no, you can't do that. You have to divert that to avoid that tree. I think that would give us the protection you seek, because ordinarily, you're right, we don't have that control, and then somebody finds out that roots have been severed to put a sewer pipe in or electric cable. So that is perfectly acceptable in my view, particularly as this is an outline application. You've alerted any prospective purchasers to don't go and start thinking you can put service runs straight through that hedge or past that tree. In terms of the comments from Place Services, I don't have access to that document at the moment, but whether or not my colleague, Ms Walker, can dip into the file. What I would say is, though, that the updated comment, Place Services are happy, but they're suggesting we fully condition all ecological matters.
Can you turn your, Councillor, can you turn your mic
sorry.
on?
Can I come? Yeah, right. Yeah. So what we may need to be conditioning things which are in that other paper. So we'll come back to that later. And again, with the tree, yes, please, can we deal with that at the end of the debate, please?
Well, that will be for us to determine whether we want it in or out.
Well, that's my request to the committee at this stage. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. Slide 20A and B, you were showing the pedestrian vehicular access through the proposed development, but you made no mention of the footpath link to the southwest where it meets the public right-of-way network. It was cut off the bottom of your map on slide 20, so could you please clarify whether that is going to be available or not?
Absolutely, categorically, it will be available. Apologies for cutting off the corner of the map. I'm sure I could actually find the drawing, but there is an arrow on the drawing that says connection to path, so apologies.
You want to come back?
Can I come back?
Yeah.
Perhaps it might be helpful. Obviously, I know exactly where it is, but maybe you could point it out to the rest of the committee when they come to their, or before they come to their deliberations, so they know what I'm talking about. It might not be clear to everybody else in the room.
Absolutely, perfectly fair request. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Field.
Thank you. Just 2 points. One, I was going to question public realm, talk on page 23 about a development of this size, 190 houses. I thought it was 40. Are they on the right development? I was going to question whether we had addressed the play provision, but I know you say that's a reserved matters issue, so nevertheless, are they on the right development? The second thing is looking at page 29, paragraph 4.1. You talk about provision of the MPPF, paragraph 72, and talking about large numbers of houses. I always thought that meant some thousands of houses, not 40. So are we misleading ourselves by considering paragraphs that don't actually apply? Thank you.
Do you want to come back, please?
Thank you, Councillor Field. The public realm comments appear to be related to an amalgamation of phase 1 and this phase. You are quite right, this is a scheme of 40 houses. We aren't requesting any specific play facilities within this part of the development because they are provided in the phase 1 part of the scheme. In terms of the reference to the MPPF, this is a small-scale residential development. Even though it technically is a major, it doesn't fall into the large-scale major category. So apologies if that has in any way misled the committee. To correct it, just to confirm, it is a major application, but it is small-scale, comprising up to 40 dwellings. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to come in that I've missed? No? Okay, so we'll move on. So thank you for that. We now move to public speaking. We don't have a representative of the parish, but we do have an extra response from Woolpit Parish Council that obviously has been included in the table papers. And we don't have an objector or supporter either. So I'll now ask the applicant, Neil Waterson, to speak. Mr. Waterson, you have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all this morning. The application before you today is a high-quality, sustainable landscape design-led scheme, which has been brought forward following extensive engagement with your officers, Suffolk County Council, Woolpit Parish Council, ward members and the local community. The proposal forms an extension to the 120 new homes granted reserve matters last year to the north and is a natural infill site being surrounded on 3 sides by development. Construction of the phase 1 site is now well underway, with the first new homes due to be completed shortly. The site is in a sustainable location, with Woolpit designated as a key service centre in both the adopted and emerging local plans, and has good access to a range of facilities within the village. The scheme is in full accordance with the draft Neighbourhood Plan Policy WPT2, location and scale of new housing developments, with the Neighbourhood Plan due for its referendum soon. As a result, the application continues to have the full support of the Parish Council, as highlighted by their comments sent to the committee. The Parish Council's support reflects the extensive engagement undertaken both before the submission of the application and during the progress of the application. The design of the scheme has been informed by comments from local residents, the Parish Council, local ward members, as well as other consultees and stakeholders, and of particular note, the scheme has been amended, incorporating bungalows and landscaping to enhance the amenity relationship with adjoining properties on the site's western boundary, and the scheme's housing mix includes a higher proportion of bungalows and 2 or 3 bed market homes, exceeding the requirements of Neighbourhood Plan Policy WPT6. All technical issues, heritage, landscape, ecology, drainage and utilities have been comprehensively addressed, and the scheme is readily deliverable. This high-quality, sustainable scheme accords with the MPPF and the development plan taken as a whole and has the support of the Parish Council and will deliver new homes to meet local needs, including affordable housing and new bungalows, land for the future expansion of the village primary and preschool, providing flexibility to meet future needs, provision of new green infrastructure and biodiversity enhancements, and enhanced pedestrian and cycle links, particularly between the school and the health centre. We believe these will provide lasting benefits for the village, and we therefore hope that you will follow your officer's recommendation and resolve to approve this application. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions from members.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Yes, Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that. Just with regards to landscaping, you mentioned it in your 3 minutes, but there doesn't seem to be, on the maps that we've got in our papers, there doesn't seem to be much landscaping identified. Have you considered more landscaping on the what would effectively be the northeast side, and then the southwest side, i.e. the bit behind the Heath Road houses? Thank you very much.
Well, we did specifically amend the layout to incorporate additional landscaping along the boundaries with the properties that back onto the site from Oaklands. That was one of the changes undertaken following discussion with local members and officers to help to protect the amenity of those properties. And obviously with the requirement that the reserve matters would need to be in substantial accordance with the layout, that will need to be incorporated. It's also a principle that's captured on the parameter plan, which is for determination as part of this planning application as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Field.
I noticed there's quite an extensive input from the police on this application, talking about surveillance and, I don't know, provision of watchtowers at the corners of the site or whatever. Has that been taken into account in an appropriate sort of way, those comments?
As part of the design of the scheme, we've tried to ensure that all residential properties are fronting onto the public realm, and that there is good overlooking of the public realm in all areas. It's always a balance in designing schemes to ensure different things are taken into account. We also have to adhere to the County Council parking standards, of course, which aren't necessarily fully aligned with some of the police comments. But obviously there's further scope to pick up some of the detail in terms of boundary treatments and things like that at reserve matters stage as well, to ensure that some of the very detailed comments from the police are taken into account at that stage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If I've missed any hands? No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move on to the ward members. We have two ward members, Councillor Helen Geek and Councillor Sarah Mansell. Who would like to go first? Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. It's always refreshing when a parish council is in support of a major planning application. Traffic from this site does not need to go through the heart of the village in order to access the A14 and the other main destinations, and this site does seem like a natural extension to the earlier application, which is currently being built out. The applicant and agent have been working with both our planning officers, parish council, and we've had several meetings with them to try and mitigate the concerns that have been raised by this application. I think we've secured the bungalows and appropriate boundary treatment along the sensitive western boundary with the existing dwellings on Heath Road. Important things from my point of view are the pedestrian and cycle links between the development site and Heath Road. Otherwise, it's a very long way round to go via Old Stowmarket Road, and people will be tempted to resort to motor vehicles. The access via the health centre should be secured by other planning applications. I don't think it's part of this application. And there will be access to the school. But it is still vital to ensure that the connection to the public right-of-way network to the southern tip of the site is also secured. The application for the extension to the school site has now been muddied by the granting of the 300 homes to the east of Bury Road with site for a proposed new school. The County Council seems now to be backtracking about whether they still want this extension site here. Yet that part of the application was the main reason that the Parish Council gave support to this application, and it is a great pity that the advice given by SALP prevented any representative from the Parish Council from attending today. Now this school extension is in the balance because the second school site, which is on the other application, the whole education of the children of both Elmswell and Woolpit is confusing. And it is the most ridiculous and unsustainable proposal to educate Elmswell's primary school children in Woolpit. Unfortunately, that's not up for discussion as part of this application, but the County Council need to offer more surety for this school extension site. And I think it's also a shame that there isn't a representative from the Suffolk County Council developer contributions or whatever their department is called here today to explain that to the committee. If this land is not used for education purposes, then no doubt we'll see further planning applications down the line. Everything is now all too uncertain. I was disappointed when I read the papers to see that the housing mix has not been conditioned as part of this outline application. The agent had some correspondence with MSDC back in November 2020, which stated that they would be happy to have such a condition. So I hope that the committee will be forthcoming with the condition about the housing mix, as was outlined in the presentation. This would also be in compliance with Woolpit Neighbourhood Plan Policy WPT6, which I don't think Vincent mentioned, which was a housing mix policy in the Woolpit Neighbourhood Plan. So I would urge you to add this as a condition if you are minded to approve today. Although not a material consideration, we are all aware that the applicant will be passing this site onto a third party for the build-out, and this will provide more certainty to the community that we're going to get what we see on the plans today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gee.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mansell is right to say that Woolpit Parish Council have supported this scheme from the outset. This is partly due to the work put into consultation by the applicant and our officers, but it is largely because it was thought to be delivering an extension to the existing school. This expanded school is strongly supported by the village. Residents do not want a second school to be built. They do not want to split the village into two educationally. And for different reasons, Elmswell Parish also, it's well known that they do not want that new school to be built. We're currently, in Woolpit, going through negotiations with another developer in the village regarding reserved matters to a large outline consent. And here we've discovered that if you don't get it absolutely right at outline stage, you have very little scope to change things later. Because of the school extension, we're not fighting the principle of development here. When I say we, I mean residents in the parish. And we can have time to look at the detail, which, as Vincent said, has been fought hard for by officers and by ward members and by the parish council. Unfortunately, a lot of the detail we've only seen in slides today. They weren't included in the documents on the website nor in the committee report. So please can I urge the committee to follow our officers' advice today in conditioning. And at the risk of being boring, can I just remind you very quickly, the bungalows should be conditioned where they were on the presentation slide 17. I don't think we have that in the committee report and the printed papers. The building heights should be conditioned to 2 stories maximum. The location of the affordable housing must be in the slides as today, particularly slide 26A. Slide 8 of the committee report that you have in front of you in the printed papers is based on an out-of-date plan. The trouble with all these lovely negotiations is they produce so many iterations of the plan. Nobody seems to have any idea which one they're using. The up-to-date plan you can see in slide 11. Those pale blue blocks are the affordables, including the bungalows behind Nowton House. The housing mix, again, as in the slide today, I think it was slide 18, this matches the aspirations, as has been said, in Woolpit's Neighbourhood Plan WPT 6. Another one, as Councillor Mansell has pointed out, please could we ensure that the footpath to the south-east links into the public footpath network? To condition the school extension site so that it can't be used as residential development is a great idea. That's the first I've heard of it today. I don't expect that it will protect this area from future development, but as you say, by the back door, it would be good to stop that. And lastly, as Councillor Matheson has suggested, that service runs should be placed away from that lovely oak tree in the corner of the health centre car park. It would be a pity to protect that just for it to die for other reasons. And can I just lastly say how sensible it is that Councillor Mansell has pointed out that it will be passed on to a third party to develop, and we have to make sure that we build in requirements to have this hard-fought detail maintained. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Field, do you have a question at this stage? Of the ward members?
Yes, it was just the issue of schooling. I easily get trapped into debate, but I find the county position obscure, to put it mildly. I was going to ask whether the ward members have actually had more detail of the county's strategic plans for schooling in this particular area. which it seems somewhat critical to the decisions we make.
You've been in discussions with them.
In terms of education policy, I believe Suffolk County Council are expecting the new school to be provided. But of course, as Councillor Mansell said, we don't have a representative from the Education Authority here. And because of the sensitivity of the issue between Woolpit and Elmswell, I would not wish to set a hare running that actually is the wrong hare. So I guess my answer, Chair, is it is a matter for Suffolk County Council. I do understand the sensitivity, but that isn't something as the Planning Authority we're here to consider today.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got two questions. First question for Councillor Mansell. There's something made in the papers of the upcoming sustainable travel linkage between the two villages. In your experience of training children to cycle, realistically, 5-year-olds attending the primary school, at what age would you think children will actually cycle the 2 miles if we get the linkage completed?
I can't answer for the rest of society, I'm afraid. I certainly cycled my kids to school when they were 4. They may have been in a trailer and they were cycling on their own at probably about 6 or 7 with an adult. I can't, and people thought I was mad, so I certainly can't answer for the rest of the population. My children would be cycling, but my children are now in their 20s, so they won't be going to primary school in Woolpit, thankfully.
Could I just put a different slant on that? I have a child with autism spectrum disorder. He has very poor balance and he's never learned to ride a bike, and he's now 15. So at least one of my children could not, and therefore the whole group could not. And I think it's probably sensible. I mean, these anecdotes are all very well, but I think it's probably sensible to think about at 8, the government expects you to be able to cope with 3 miles rather than 2, doesn't it? So I think that any child from 5 to 8 definitely, you know, it's very unusual that they'll be cycling like Councillor Mansell's family. Above 8, it's very unusual that, like my family, we won't be cycling.
Yeah, I think we can give multiple examples, can't we? But the 3 versus 2 is set. Yeah, did you want to come back?
Yes, yeah. I think
let's just have the case officer come back, then we'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just remind members of the slide that we presented towards the beginning of my presentation, where Suffolk County Council have described the expansion that will occur in Elmswell of school places. There is, at the moment, with that, they haven't reached capacity. So what we're looking at in Elmswell is a future situation. And obviously, if more development happens in Elmswell, pressure builds. But at the moment, it isn't the issue that perhaps has been suggested this morning, if the County Council's comment is correct. We can go to that slide if we need to.
No, we'll go to Councillor Matheson, please.
Yeah, it's a planning question, and it relates to the same issues, really. Are we able to actually link the 2 uses on this site, such that the housing only goes ahead if the school expansion is taken up?
I would say that is unreasonable, because I think we have established that it is a sustainable development in a sustainable location and would pass the MPPF tests of sustainability.
Okay. So we're going to, one more question. Questions for the ward member. Oh, sorry, I do apologise. Councillor Eburn was next. Then Councillor, we'll come back to you, Councillor Field.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. it's actually will be a question for the officer, driven from what the ward members have said. In the school places, there's 30 in the county's response. There are 34 places that would have arisen from the Hawley Park application, which was refused on appeal. So that is not going to happen. So we are 34 places short in the area, and I too am very disappointed, given the school is a very key thing, that we haven't got somebody here from the infrastructure team to discuss that. And I also wanted to ask about the parish council's representation here today. Apparently they've been given different legal advice about attending meetings than we have. They've been given advice from SALC not to attend meetings, and we've been given advice to attend meetings. So how can we question the parish council if they aren't here? Thank you.
Well, I think we'll go to the monitoring officer on that. I mean, the government is clear that meetings need to take place. Could you comment on the fact that parish councils aren't able to attend?
So, I can't comment on...
Can you turn the mic on?
Oh, sorry. And take my mask off. Yeah. So, I can't comment on the advice that SALC has given to parish councils. The government regulations state that councils should look to arrange meetings after the 17th, but obviously we have a statutory obligation and legal obligation to consider planning, and that falls within the regulations that was released on April the 12th, which says if there are legal reasons we can hold meetings. So there, you know, as I say, for parishes they can hold meetings. It doesn't say you can't, but the advice was they should hold them after the 17th of May.
I have to say, and I know we're going back to hearsay, but I've got 3 parish councils next meet that are meeting physically. So I know they are starting up again. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Councillor Field.
Yeah, sorry to return to the school one, but I think it is vital. I certainly found the figures in the paper confusing, although I think the officer quoted some more numbers this morning, or had a slide with more numbers. It's totally unclear to me whether the county actually requires both this primary, expanded or not expanded, and this other school site that's suggested. Whether it's just trying to play this for maximum financial gain, or whether there is really an issue of pupil numbers, because they didn't quote existing pupil numbers to us. And whatever, you know, it's clearly their responsibility. Clearly, it's irresponsible to give permission for housing where the infrastructure, the school infrastructure, doesn't match. So, have they given that guidance, or is it like in my area they're keeping it under their hats?
Vincent.
That is something that I don't have the answer to. All I have are the figures that were presented at the start of this. I can't speak for our colleagues at Suffolk County Council.
Okay, thank you. Right, yeah, Councillor Mann.
Sorry, just returning again to the school. We've heard that if the County Council don't require the land, it will return to the original owner. I'm interested in timescales here, in that the school is dependent on future demand. Do we know at what point that transfer will happen, and will it happen to a as yet unidentified developer? It seems to be a very messy situation, and I do have concerns that in 3 years' time we'll be sat here discussing development on that bit of land. So, is there a timescale that the County Council have got to make a decision about whether they need that land or not?
I think the answer is, to some degree, in the gift of this committee. Obviously, in terms of the fine detail of the Section 106 agreement, there would be an element that we might call a sunset clause, i.e. if it isn't taken up by the county, it is returned. But you could suggest 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. That is in the gift of this committee. So if you want to direct us as officers in our negotiation, that is something you could do.
Is it within the gift of this committee to dictate that that land is returned to the parish rather than the original owner?
That is something I have considered, and My answer, I think, would have to be, in terms of the test of reasonableness, this proposal actually includes provision of open space. We are only looking at 40 dwellings. So the open space that is being provided for recreational purposes meets your standards. To secure the field for additional open space on the back of 40 dwellings, I suspect there will be some resistance from the landowner and the applicant on the reasonable ground that it wouldn't pass the civil test of being reasonable. You would be asking for more than is eligible based on a scheme of 40 dwellings. Unfortunately, it is something I thought about, it is something I floated, but I had to think, actually, if this was pushed, we would probably be on very weak ground in terms of the test of reasonableness. But it is something I looked at.
Can I just come back to the point around the time scale then? Because, I mean, obviously a lot depends on, future families moving to the area. I mean, these things aren't something that happens tomorrow. The planning for schools is something that's very far forward thinking. So, what is a reasonable time frame? I mean, 2 years is certainly not reasonable. I would have thought 5 is tight, because, I mean, planning goes on far into the future.
I would always err on the side of caution, and I would go for 10 to 15.
Okay, I think we've got no other hands up, so we'll now move into debate. So, members, over to you. We've obviously had written representations. We've heard from the ward members. We've heard from the case officer. Councillor Muller, you want to start?
Thank you very much, Chair. It's been very interesting to listen to everyone's comments on this. Personally, I will be prepared to recommend approval of this application, subject to all the conditions that the case officer mentioned earlier. For example, 2-storey maximum for the houses. The condition regarding the location of bungalows, I think that's very important to consider the residents already living in Heath Road. A condition of the location of the affordable housing, i.e. the housing mix. Also a condition about permitted development, so that in the future that residents could not put windows in their roofs, roof space, etc., so they wouldn't look over the properties on Heath Road. And also I totally agree with Councillor Matheson's comment that a condition should be made regarding service runs not prejudicing the oak tree and the other trees on the site. And I also would accept the condition regarding the school, and I do agree with what, Chair, you mentioned there. We have to look at the future, and I think this should be at least a minimum of 10 years. So on that basis, I will be happy to recommend approval. Thank you, Chair.
So are you proposing that? Yes. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Passmore.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to second Councillor Muller. I think it has been a very interesting debate, and I do agree with all those conditions. We are talking about 40 houses. The fact that the parish council is in favour, I think, is important. And as someone said, it's actually quite refreshing to find that in a planning application. And our officers said it is sustainable, and I do agree with them in this case. And so therefore, I'm happy to support it. As regards the timeline, I'm not trying to split hairs here. By the time these applications actually get going construction, sometimes it does take a couple of years. I know we've got to come back for reserve matters and so on. I would just think perhaps at this stage we need to perhaps say 12, 13 years, maybe 15, only because we're trying to be pragmatic. As you rightly say, Chairman, planning schools is a long, protracted process and always controversial, as we see today. But we do need to be pragmatic, and I am just suggesting, if Councillor Muller would agree with that, that perhaps edging up to the 15 years from now might be more sensible on the grounds that it has to be reasonable. And that's not me trying to duck the issue. We've got to make sure it works and we don't get into a tangle later. So, in summary, Chairman, I'm very happy to second Councillor Muller's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up was Councillor Field.
Yes, I was going to suggest I seconded it, but that seems to have gone. I mean, much of this has been said. The parish council support is important. Clearly, most of the criteria seem to suggest that we should approve this. With the list of conditions that Councillor Muller suggested. I do find the education issue a significant concern, if nothing else, for certainty of people, the parents involved and the population of Woolpit at the moment. it does seem that the county just seems reluctant to make decisions on these issues and give clarity, even if that clarity is if X gets approved, we'll do Y, and if Z gets approved, we'll do A, or whatever it is. I certainly know in my area, Blakenham, schools have been, sites have been proposed and schools have been discarded. They've decided not to take those schools up, to the great disquiet of the people who've purchased houses on the basis that a school is going to appear. And we've all heard the concerns about pupils having to travel from Elmswell to Woolpit. You know, so there is a lot of concern, and we're just not giving a clear, consistent, coherent set of plans to address those issues, to my view. You know, having said that, most of the matters are perfectly satisfactory. So I'll certainly support the application, but with an extended whinge that we should do better on some of our decision processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Next up is Councillor Matheson. You're next. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to gently correct Councillor Passmore that we've not had a debate. We've asked quite a number of questions about the school, but we've absolutely not had a debate yet. And I must say I'm very, very uncomfortable with this school situation. I know Mr. Pearce wants us to say, oh, well, it's not a matter for this committee or whatever, but the public expects us, I think particularly the district, which does the majority of land use planning, expects us to deliver good planning and good development. And putting the school in the wrong village it's just not good planning. At the end of the day, it is not beyond the bounds of possibility that the county would purchase a site in the correct village and set aside the offer of school land. I seem to remember in Thurston we were offered two school sites, which was one more than was needed, and got into a bit of a muddle on other matters. And it's not the right answer. And you know, and right, Mr. Pearce said that it's unreasonable to withhold and link the two together, the two issues together. But really, we ought to be doing that, because again, that's actually sensible planning. We've got loads and loads of houses being developed in Woolpit. Do we need another 40? Not urgently. We're told that the parish has supported this, particularly on the basis that it will provide the extension of the school that Woolpit needs, which is not the same thing as providing another school for a different village. So I can't support this as it is. I just wish that the officers could show us a way in which we can actually deliver sensible planning, but I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I too have got grave concerns about this school site. I just feel that it's very poor service from the school's infrastructure team at the county, in that, you know, we should have consistent planning as to what is needed. You know, we've been talking about housing numbers for years, you know, how it is not possible to actually forecast and agree where school sites should be or extensions to schools should be in the villages where those pupils live. It is beyond me. So I'm very concerned that this site, that we will sit here in a few years' time and be coming across a site to fill in that piece of land as an agricultural use. I mean, if it goes back to agricultural use, I mean, how they're even going to access it? You know, drive tractors across the estate? I'm not sure. So I'm very concerned about the lack of proper future planning for this school site. And any detail from the county council. And it does concern me that locals have supported this. They supported the previous application because of the community benefits it would give to provide a health centre car park, and they would support this one because the school would be extended. But if the school's not going to be extended, what do they get? Another 40 houses with no extension to their local primary school that's been there since Victorian times. So I'm very uncomfortable about it, and I would like a bit of clarification from the officer. I know it was mentioned by Councillor Passmore and Councillor Muller about the time frame that might go in the section 106, if you could clarify that. And also, if other members are minded to approve, could we just also add in it does mention estate roads and footpaths in the conditions, but that there isn't a clear thing about the actual footpath link to the footpath that is to the west of the site. So if that could just be east, sorry, Sarah, I was just kind of the east of the site. So if that could just be confirmed, but I remain uncomfortable about the school situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes, case officer, please.
Apologies. Mandy, if you could take us to slide 15. I'm conscious that... Oh, okay. Let's do it this way then. Councillor Mansell, you have that outstanding question, and Councillor Eben, you've just raised it again about the footpath. So let me take you to the slide 15. Do you see in the bottom right-hand corner the purple arrow? That is connection to public footpath. It is safeguarded on that drawing. There wouldn't be an issue if members were absolutely wanting belt and braces to have a condition that says this scheme shall make a connection to that footpath. I mean, that would give you absolute cast iron guarantee. The layout actually does provide it, but let's make sure. And in terms of points raised by, if I may, Chair, Councillor Geek, referring to a number of slides, that is the slide, Councillor Geek, that we could use as our basis for the condition for the mix. And this is the sort of thing we can do by condition in words, rather than perhaps drawing to safeguard that area for bungalows. We can prescribe generally the location for the affordable housing, which I think members did feel was worthwhile. So I'm absolutely happy that the insistence from Councillor Geek around let's see some of that detail we can condition. And in terms of your point, Councillor Eburn, around timescales, I'm not here to argue education policy, but what I can say, I agree with councillors who said education policy and new schools can take time. New development often takes 5, 6, 7 years to be completed. I would err on the side of caution, and let's say there is a 15-year period within which the County Council can call on that land for education purposes. If the County Council in that period decides definitively it doesn't want it, then I think you would have to have a clause that says in the event that it is formally declined ahead of 15 years, it gets handed back. But I think we should keep it open for as long as we can because of the vicissitudes of educational thinking. I don't know whether, Gemma, you're...
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think that would be it, is if you have 15 years, it gives us the maximum option for that to be taken up and the availability. And that's what I would say about the school on this side. It's a bit like Vince touched on with the public open space. We've got to look to mitigate this site. I appreciate the concerns about the schools elsewhere and the mix and how people get there. But we're talking, have we got educational mitigation for these 40? Now, it seems to me we're securing the land and we're doing that for 15 years. County have then said, if it is a school expansion, we'll also get SIL from this site towards school provision. And in any case, if we don't get SIL, we'll also have some money for new school in any case. So for me, those three things do mitigate the education provision for this specific site. And I appreciate all the points of concern, but we do have to look at what this site is proposing and the mitigation for this site, unfortunately not more widely. Does that help? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Councillor Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. I'm largely in agreement with my colleagues who spoke earlier in the front row. I think this is a reasonable site. It is disappointing that at county level, the education requirements seem to be so fluid and need to be defined. But I think we're countering that and to a certain extent carrying the county by having to put the 15 years in, and perhaps that message can be taken back by those who serve on both bodies, that we as a district council would welcome more clarity around education in our district. As I come from a ward with only one very small school, I envy Woolpit in the fact they may have an extension to one and a building of another. One small point about location of affordable housing. Whilst I support the need for that affordable housing to be spread throughout the development, I would not wish to tie the hands of the developers by specifying the locations. A better design may come forward, but if we've specified where affordable housing has to be, we may derail that design. So I would be more comfortable with saying that affordable housing should be spread throughout the development, rather than telling the developer where he's got to put specific houses. Thank you.
Okay, well, we've had a proposal from Councillor Mullin, seconded by Councillor Passmore. Now, the question is, how do you want to deal with that last point about the locations of the affordable housing?
Thank you, Chair. No, I do take Councillor Mayor's point on that, and if Councillor Passmore is happy with that, members are happy with that.
State a number, but not the location, is what we're saying. Is
Yes, I'll be happy with that. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jim. I think Councillor Mayer's point was the condition ought to require it to be distributed across, because what we normally try and do is avoid a single hub. So we could do that substantially in accordance with and a even distribution or some similar.
Good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to run through, please, all the new recommendations that are now before us. Whoever's going to do that. Gemma, over to you. And just check we've got everything that everyone wants included, because clearly this is...
There's a lot there. No, that's fine. So I think we are looking at the recommendation on page 36, but with the update on page 11 of the tabled papers in terms of the section 106. Good, nod from Vince. And then the additional, and as part of that, we're looking at the timescale for the land to be for 15 years availability. And then in terms of additional conditions, we're looking at a condition to restrict the residential use areas so that they can't build on that agricultural, the extra land later, that that's separate. Then we're agreeing the mix, and that's to be agreed, that we're limiting the storey heights to 2-storey, that we're securing the specific bungalow locations so that they are in those locations adjacent to the Heath Road properties, and that we are agreeing the number and distribution of affordable housing. I think that captures that point. That we're removing permitted development rights, that we are putting a condition that service runs are to be agreed where these could prejudice the retention of the trees, and the southern footpath shall be provided to link into the public right-of-way.
The only other thing I had on my list was the state roads, as you mentioned.
That is on there. I think if I just bear with me 2 seconds. I thought I spotted that one. The 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet point up from the bottom, estate road and footpath, is in the recommendation.
Councillor Field.
The bit about essentially in line with the indicative plan, did I miss that in your list? I might not have been listening carefully enough.
It wasn't, because it's in the recommendation. So reserve matters, the second bullet point, reserve matters to be submitted in accordance with the submitted parameters plan. So that's already there. I was just running through the extras.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Oh, Vince.
Sorry, Gemma, your reference to parameters plan, I think the committee would rather that was the indicative layout, because the parameters plan is just a series of arrows.
So the other update then is that instead of on bullet 2, the parameters plan, that we're relating it to the indicative plan. Is that correct? It'd be a straight swap, Vince, not both. Okay.
Good. So I think on that basis, are we... Yes, Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, to the biodiversity and ecology items in the middle of the conditions there. Two questions. Can we make the enhancement strategy, etc., come forward concurrent with reserved matters? I think we started to do that. There's just one word there. And also whether anything else emerged from this October 2019, if you were able to find it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem if members are making the recommendation happy that the biodiversity is concurrent with reserved matters. And the recommendations from October 2019, I think was the proposed conditions that the ecologist recommends are that it's in accordance with the preliminary ecological appraisal, which as far as I can see is in the recommendation, that we have a landscape and ecological management plan, again already in the recommendation, that we have a biodiversity enhancement strategy, which we've just referenced, a badger method statement, again that's included, and finally a wildlife sensitive lighting design scheme, which again I think that's included. So I believe all of those points that the ecologist initially required are in the recommendation.
Thank you very much. So on that basis we'll go to a vote. Now, Robert, you're not going to be able to type all of that into modern.gov, but over to you.
Chair, rather than disappointing you, I already have. So it's all there for members. So if you're happy for me to take through the vote, I will do that now.
Yes, please.
So if members could please go to the modern.gov app and go to today's agenda and go to the plus sign on the top right-hand corner for today's meeting. From that, you will get the subsection on voting and attendance, and there you will see the line in a light blue colour showing how to vote. So if...
I'm a bit worried about mixed TBA. I thought the mix was part of the condition, not to be arranged, TBA means to me.
I believe it's to be agreed, isn't it, Gemma? That's the...
I thought the mix had been agreed, and it was the mix on the slide that Mr Pearce showed us. Sorry, that's my fault. I have put down as slide 18, but I wrote to be agreed as slide 18. That was the intention, is that it would be as that slide. As agreed? As per... Have you got a plan for that specifically, Vince? Yes. So we can have as per the plan? Yes. Fine. Sorry, my mistake. So as the plan, I'll make the note of that one.
Okay, back to you, Robert.
Thank you, Chair. So with that in mind, so Councillor Passmore, could I take your vote, please? For. Thank you very much. And Councillor Hicks. Thank you very much. So, just waiting on one vote, Chair.
I can't get it won't scroll down for some reason.
Well, just give it verbally, John. Just give your answer verbally if you want.
Okay, I'm against.
So, Chair, taking those votes, so it comes to 5 votes for and 2 against, with Councillor Mansell not voting as she's the board member. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Thank you very much. Now, we always say after 90 minutes we should have a break, but a break's more complicated today than obviously normal. So we will have a quick 10-minute break for people that want to go, but please be very mindful of the social distancing rules as you use the facilities. And we will start again at 10 past. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So we move on to the next planning application, which is DC 20-05587 in Great Bricett Business Park. And we now hand over to the case officer, Catherine Hale, to introduce the application. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So before you have an application, a full planning application for the change of use of land to allow for the siting of up to 73 mobile homes following the demolition of the existing buildings on site. So this is obviously Great Bricett in context with the surrounding area. You can see Watersham to the northwest and Barking to the northeast. This is a site location plan. So above the site to the north is an existing mobile home park. To the east and south of the site is mostly agricultural land as well as a few dwellings. Watersham Airfield base is to the northwest. So this just shows the aerial map view, puts it in a bit more context, obviously with the surrounding development and particularly the existing site to the north. Constraints-wise, the site is pretty much unconstrained. There is a footpath running along the outside of the site, but it doesn't fall within the red line site plan. These are just two aerial images to show the existing Nissan huts which are on site. These are situated to the rear of the site, and obviously if this application is approved, these will be demolished to allow for the siting of the mobile homes. This is a proposed site layout. So in terms of, what we're looking at, the principle is that the site already benefits from an existing extant outline planning permission. This was granted in 2020 for up to 51. It was outline, so the number could technically change, it could be lower, but this slide shows the existing site, the proposed site layout plan in terms of the mobile homes on the left, and then you've got the indicative site layout plan for the dwellings that have been granted on the right to show that they're within the same site and they also go down to front the road. But it's considered that, as per obviously your committee documents, that the principle of development in this area has been established by this extant consent, and therefore actually the principle of erecting up to 73 mobile homes on the site is considered acceptable. So in terms of accessibility and location, whilst it is outside the settlement boundary, it is considered to be connected. Whilst it's acknowledged there will be some reliance on the private motor car, there are bus routes and it is well connected as per the previous outline established. This is just to show the bus stops are nearby. And part of the conditions or section 106, should members be minded to go with the recommendation, is to secure a footpath to the bus stops. So at the moment we've got floods and water with a holding objection. In terms of surface water drainage, they have a few issues. We have tried to resolve it prior to coming to committee. However, there hasn't been sufficient time, but these can be conditioned. And these can be a prior to commencement condition. In terms of strategic housing, because the site is for up to 73 mobile homes, they're considered in the same instance with normal residential dwellings for affordable homes. Strategic housing aren't requiring obviously any affordable home provision in terms of mobile caravans or static homes, but they are seeking a commuted sum. As of late yesterday afternoon and today, the commuted sum hasn't been agreed, and strategic housing are standing by their original response, which is outlined in the papers before you, that they're seeking a commuted sum for this scheme. So this would be secured, should we go with my recommendation, which is for the grant of planning permission. This should be secured via section 106. So yeah, that's the scheme. Yeah. The aerial photograph. Yeah.
So the access to those, where does that take you to and from?
The access is off of the main road to the, you can see it here, down to the south.
Where is, can you just point out with the
So the road basically goes here from Matheson Huts around and down and onto the main road here.
So when you say main road, what road is that?
Off the top of my head, bear with
I don't
me.
know the area at all.
No, it's fine. It's Pound Hill. Sorry. So the road is Pound Hill.
Have we got a better map that can show us where it is in relation?
So the village of Great Bricett is further
sorry.
down to the south.
Terrible trouble hearing. But there's the noise of the papers, the noise of the air conditioning, and close to the face of the mic.
Right, is that better? Yeah. Okay, I'll just hover over it. So to the northwest, I'll try and get the pointer up again. This is obviously Watersham Airfield Base is over here, and you've got the cluster of dwellings for that. Ringshaw is slightly further to the northeast, and Great Bricett is further down to the south of this road. I think I've only got one very far out, which was at the start.
So going back to the access, so the access for all those 70, sorry, the access for all the 71 or 73, 73 is through that entrance onto that road, and that single access point is enough for 140 odd cars.
Yep, Suffolk County Council Highways have been consulted and they're happy with the proposal. They believe it meets the requirements, obviously subject to conditions, and it's in a 30-mile zone anyway. Because it's an existing business park, the site access and the road is wider than it looks on the plans. So the junction into the site is wide enough for, obviously, vehicles to enter and exit at the same time.
Other questions to the case officer, please? Yeah, Councillor Muller first, then Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Catherine, you outlined a number of bus routes close to this particular site. How frequent are the actual buses to this area, please? Thank you.
Obviously, it depends on, how you interpret frequent. They aren't every hour as such, but there's enough for people to get to places such as Stowmarket and further afield without sole reliance onto, private motor vehicles.
Sorry, could you just point out where is the bus stop on the...
So you can see up here, this is the existing park, and here are the Matheson Huts, and the site would go down here. This is the entrance onto the site. So there's a bus stop here and a further few bus stops down here.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a whole swath of hands, so I'll just go along. Councillor Muller next. Sorry, Councillor Nair. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Can you bring up the outline planning permission that's already in place, please?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
It's on the right.
So, whilst that outline is only indicative, the current full application seems to differ from that outline, which is an indicative plan, and the existing, that the caravans won't have any personal space.
They'll have limited sort of space around the caravans, but not per se. With this application, it's solely the principle that we're really looking at. The layout and almost design of the the caravans or mobile homes are actually determined by licensing under the Caravanning and Campsite Act, hence why we've not obviously got any elevational drawings. That's a separate entity. It ends up being the principle that...
Although it's a full application, we're not actually concerned with layout because it's a caravan site.
Yeah, just for permanent residential use, that element is dealt with under the licensing.
Can I ask a follow-on from that then? Are we talking about a number that is too much? Could we say a number of 73 is too much?
I think we could.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Mansell, you were next.
Thank you. Could you, I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, could you clarify the situation about the parking spaces proposed for each unit, which is mentioned in paragraph 5.2 on page 117. Could you also clarify the fact that because this is a caravan park, we don't need any public open space? And also, I notice on the planning portal that the most up-to-date drawing on the portal on the 9th of March is for 69 units, not for 73. So could you comment on why there's a layout with 69 when we're being asked now to allow up to 73? Thank you.
So taking those in turn, in terms of the highway provision or the car parking provision, obviously County Council Highways have looked at the plans and they're happy with the amount of parking spaces. I believe that because they're not residential dwellings in the usual sense, the parking guidance is slightly different, and that each one having one parking provision is considered acceptable in this instance. And then with regards to the number, I hadn't, obviously there's an error on my part. I assume there was up to 73, and presumably, here before you can decide whether the 69 that are shown are more appropriate than the 73, but it's that leeway of when you're considering up to, it can vary, I presume, because of the Campsite and Caravan and Campsite Act. Again, that allows potentially for fewer caravans, but if we deem this acceptable and grant permission, they couldn't have any more than 73. It's more of the maximum, I believe.
Do you want to come in, Gemma, on that? Because I think we need to be clear what's before us, 69 or 73.
Yeah, so obviously the description is for 73. Perhaps, Catherine, would you just have a quick check on the plan of how many is actually on there for us? Essentially, it's a bit like the outline situation, which is if we think 73 is acceptable, then that's what we're determining in front of us, but we do need the plan to essentially match up to that. If you think less would be appropriate, then there are a manner of choices before you. We could refuse because we think the 73 is unacceptable, or we could potentially defer because we think it's a few less and we're not quite there. So that would be probably an option for debate, but essentially we should be looking at 73, but I would just like to confirm that we have got a plan and that the plans we are all looking at have got that number on there.
We haven't had a response about the public open space yet, but I'm sorry, I read section 5.2 is that the Highways Authority are not making comment. That's not the same as be approving it. They make no comment regarding the proposal. So that doesn't quite tally with what you said, but can we have an answer about the lack of public open space?
Again, it goes down to the way that the mobile home site is looked at and considered. This is a principle of the change of use and whether mobile homes would be appropriate, as opposed to the layout, which usually comes with a public open space. I'd have to check with Gemma, but I don't think there's anything to say that we couldn't ask for potentially public open space in a section 106 agreement. I'm not entirely sure on that one.
So it's different from the houses that we've been looking at that they've got the consent for on the site, in that they obviously don't each come with their own garden land. They are part of a wider site. So the understanding is that as you step out of one of these, you are in some form of open space. Hence the slight differentiation between the two matters, that in a house, you've got your private garden land, and obviously if we don't provide that, where do you go? In a flat, for example, we might then expect public open space. But because of the way this is, it is in its own space. Whether you consider that sufficient, or whether you would like something like an area for play or some more wide open space park type provision, would be something we could look at as to whether there's capacity, or, as Catherine says, through securing that as part of the 106, that they will provide a scheme for some open space, and that then we will agree that. So there is that. It is very different from how we'd normally deal with houses. Does that help on the open space point?
I'll come back to it in debate, I suspect.
Can I just ask how many parking spaces there are on site for the amount of homes with the extra? Do we have a figure?
Yeah, sorry, I was just counting the other ones. Can I have a moment to just do a maths?
Well, we can ask the applicant. Okay, so moving on. Councillor Matheson, you're next.
Thank you. I'd first like to help on the matter of the bus services. If we could have a look at the, there is a slide, isn't there, of where the buses are coming from and so on. What I wanted to, let's wait for it to appear. Yep, gone past it. That's that one, that's right. So are we saying that the bus service, because 461, 462, they actually go between Stowmarket and Hadley, and they go through my ward, the village of Great Fimbra. And my current understanding is that the scheduled service is down to 2 days a week, but it's erratically running, not managing to do that at the moment. So I think that we should not overstate the idea that there's a bus service. I'm not familiar with what the 111's bus does, but I suspect it isn't tremendously frequent either. That's on the buses. And the other point is paragraph 4.3, talking about the shop and the post office closing. They were on the airbase, but the public house is the subject of a current redevelopment application. Now, my understanding is that it was the subject of a change of use application, but that this has been refused, unless I'm sorely mistaken. So whether officers could just help us understand what's happened there.
Yeah, no, so the application for the pub, it was the Red Lion in Great Bricett, and it was, as you rightly said, it was for a change of use into a residential dwelling. It was refused earlier this year, I think potentially a month ago, maybe, or a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, the agent has the right to, an applicant has the right to appeal. So it's not to say it won't go from a pub to a house. It's, we've made our decision. It's down to the planning inspectorate if an appeal comes in. As far as I'm aware, we haven't had an appeal yet. And I would assume that, given the current restrictions lifting for COVID, that potentially the pub is opening again as a pub, but I don't know that exactly.
Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about open space as well, so thank you for clarifying that. But also landscaping. There doesn't seem to be much landscaping on site. I just wondered if you could clarify that, please. And also, seems to be a great deficit in health provision. Could you kind of give any opinion on the likelihood of, if civil funds are forthcoming, that will actually meet the potential demand from this side? Thank you, Chair.
So again, the landscaping, it falls down to the Campsite and Caravan and Campsite Act, as opposed to this actual application. I believe the agent's with us today, so we could potentially see direct those questions to him later on to see if there's a way to get more landscaping in. I imagine we could probably still condition it. Gemma's nodding. So if that's what we'd like to see, should you go with the recommendation, then we can obviously condition landscape plans to be submitted and so on. With regards to the healthcare, I believe there is a SIL contribution. Just need to check.
Yeah, we might just need a second to check on that because it's about built floor space and the definition of it. So it might be a technical. I mean, we'll have a look, but in theory, either it's built floor space and it contributes. It may fall out of the definition of built floor space, but that's not to say under the wider SIL fund that if the NHS applied for more funding here, it would come out of the pot. So it is neither or, but I can check the detail if you'd like.
Thanks. So can I just a couple of follow-up? Can I just ask for absolute clarity? So how many of these are 2-bedroom versus 1-bedroom? How many car parking spaces are there total for the 73 locations, and how many visitor car parking spaces are there? And can you just give absolute clarity where all the rainwater, foul water and sewage from the 73 properties is going to actually go and be dealt with? Just clear.
Yeah, so there's not any proposed 1-beds. It's a mix of 2 to 3. I don't have the specific information as to how many 2-beds compared to how many 3-beds. I do have the size of the units and how many of each size, which may give an indication. Obviously, the larger the unit, most likely to be a 3-bed.
I'll ask the applicant for the detail on that. Thanks.
Yeah.
And the car parking?
I need to count. Unfortunately, I can't respond to the questions and also count at the same time. I'll miss the questions. So
I'm just thinking visitor parking. Do we know how many visitor bays there are?
I don't believe there are any for the site. I think it's purely one allocated space per mobile site home.
Right, okay. And where does all the sewage go from a minimum of 150 people living on site?
I'll just double check. There's probably something for the applicant. I am aware that obviously floods have still got a holding objection in terms of surface water drainage, which is something to bear in mind.
So at the moment there's an objection from the floods team at the County Council on surface water drainage.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right, so if there's an objection from the County Council on this, why is the recommendation for as it is?
So we can go away and ask for the extra information. It's about the fact they haven't updated their drainage strategy to match some of it. So it's not a out and out no from County Council. It's a we haven't got the information. So I think the query had been, do they provide the information, then come to committee and it's a no? Or actually, can we come to committee, have that decision from yourselves, is this okay or not? If you are happy with it in principle, what I would suggest is we're delegating authority to officers to go and secure that. If it's not securable, we'll look to refuse it on the grounds as advised by County Floods. Hopefully it will be securable. We can then go away, add the conditions and go through 106. So it's more a matter of resolving it. And often applicants do want, your decision on these things before they go through further kind of costs to resolve that matter. Thank you.
Sorry to mention the same query again, but I've been delving deeper into the planning diagrams on the planning portal, and I believe I'm happy to be corrected, but the plan that we've got on page 178 of our papers is the one that is labelled 69 dwellings, and I think there are 69 dwellings on it. I've looked further down the planning portal and there is a superseded drawing which claims it's got 73 units but appears to only be the units on the other side, adjacent side. So we haven't actually got an indicative layout of how they're going to put 73 units on this site. Could I have some confirmation that I'm reading this correctly? Do we or do we not have an indicative plan of how we're going to fit 73 units on this site?
If you can give me a few moments to finish counting rather than trying to answer the questions, and I can come back rather than, so that's okay.
Well, I think what we'll do, I think what we'll do is we'll, have we got any other questions apart from the size and the car parking? Yes, Councillor Passman.
Chairman, I don't know whether this is appropriate now, and it is a question. I'm just wondering whether there seem to be a lot of loose ends hanging around here, and I'm a little bit uncomfortable. Is it appropriate to defer it at this stage, to be fair to everybody involved? That's my question, because I think there's an awful lot of issues here that we need some clarification on, and I'm not being critical to anybody here. It is a fairly significant application. I just wonder, to be fair to the applicant and everybody on the committee and everything else, is this the time to make a suggestion for a deferment? That's my personal view.
I think what we'll do is, yes, Councillor. Yeah, exactly. I think what we'll do is we'll go through and hear from the applicant, because we've got to have the opportunity to ask the applicant the questions that we're all asking, and then at that point we'll decide if we have enough information before us or not. Would be my view.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Right, I've counted. I've counted. Finally, 69. So I'm.
Can I just say, if on the basis of what's been presented to this committee and on the basis of what's before us in the papers is showing 69, but we are told the application is for 73, we're being asked to make a decision on papers that are not accurate. So therefore, we will have to defer the application, this is my opinion, because we haven't got the correct papers.
So am I switched on? Oh, right. Thank you, Chairman. I'm at a little disadvantage myself because I've got IT problems, which Mr. Carmichael's done his best to help me with the spare computer. But if I can ask my colleague, this is an application for a change of use. So it's for stationing of, not for operational development, it's for the use of land for the stationing of mobile homes.
Yeah, it's the change of use for stationing of up to 73.
So it's not quite the same as, do we know how many houses they want to build, and or at least up to? But it is obviously still an important point. Goes without saying. So I think if
so if the papers that have been shown on the screen, the papers that are before us are showing 69, but the application is for 73. We're looking in the drawings, but not for the current application.
Perhaps I come in there as well, and I'm open to your advice, but I think my point would be where we normally get to an outline, which if you can't demonstrate that we could put them on there, that makes it more difficult to make a decision. If we had a lot more spare space, I'd probably be saying, look, there are other options. The plan on slide 6 in the papers doesn't seem to me like there is extra space where there'd be flexibility, so I would have concern whether we could do it, and therefore I'll be tending to agree that we should have a plan that shows that, but would that you...
Can I switch on again? Yes, thank you. Through you, Chairman, I think Gemma's hit the nail on the head. If it would be, as long as we could be reasonably satisfied in making a decision that that number could be accommodated on the site, that would be fair enough. And it would be a bit unfortunate if there was some confusion between different drawings. But if, as Gemma says, there appears to be a cause for concern that we've got a plan with 69 on and no more space. But, I mean...
Sorry, John. My feeling is that, as has just been said, we've got a map in front of us showing 69 dwellings. The application is for 74. There's nowhere before us where you can obviously fit in another, to get it up to that number. I think, therefore, and the papers only show 60, don't show the full amount. I'm not comfortable making a decision today when we haven't got all the information before us. I now don't think, based on that information, I don't think there's any point taking it any further, would be my view. So I'm going to propose that this is deferred and come back to another meeting based on the information that's been presented, the fact that we haven't got accurate detail in front of us of what's being applied for. All those in favour?
Chair, sorry, we need to second that, and then we've got...
Yeah, sorry, who would second that?
And we're going to have the electronic vote.
And we do it electronically. Sorry.
While Mr. Carmichael's sorting out a voting slip for us, I don't think we ever got to the bottom of the foul drainage question that you put. I got a feeling I saw that it was not going to be connected. It was going to be an on-site, but I can't find that note anywhere. So I leave that thought with officers.
Let's take this vote, and that's for officers to bring back next time.
Could we point out there are some other details as well, like the bus service frequency
so
that
I
was
think
discussed?
you've heard
That's what I was going to suggest. So I'm thinking, so we've got the, let me scroll this down to go. So we've got the bus service query. You'd also like to know about the car parking numbers. Hold on.
And perhaps what our licensing, caravan licensing people would do, what their attitudes are. Because I know there are sites in my district ward which are park homes, and for instance, parking is a problem. People who live in park homes, sometimes they both have a car and sometimes they have visitors, believe it or not. And it is a continuous problem. So one would like perhaps to know what that department is intending to do.
And built on that point, we need to know the number of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom, because that's going to help determine the point John's has made.
And there's a comment here about the distance to the school. I've no idea whether it's 50 yards across muddy fields or 5 kilometres across muddy fields.
So I've got the bus service, car parking and visitor spaces, the flooding issue from County Floods to be confirmed, some more information, services in terms of foul water drainage, and the number of bedrooms likely. I think bedrooms might be a slightly more difficult one because it is a sighting of them, but I think we can at least give more information, hopefully, from some of the details.
Would we not sometimes condition X number of 2, X number of 3?
Yep.
So we need to know that to understand how to condition it. Yeah. And open space and landscaping. Okay. Okay, Robert, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I have on my list, just to double check with Gemma, just to cross-reference very briefly, to defer the application to to seek further accurate information on the application with regards to the indicative plan, details of bus routes, details of parking spaces, details on floods and drainage, and details on open space and landscaping. Is that everything? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So, members, if you could please go to the modern.gov app and go to the vote in the top right-hand, go to the plus sign in the top right-hand corner and go to the attendance/voting tab. If you click on the voting tab, it will take you to today's vote that's in progress, shown in a light blue colour. You may need to scroll down the page. I will now take
Sorry,
Councillor
Rob,
Parsons.
did I miss proposer and seconder?
So we had Councillor Hicks propose, and then Councillor Parsons second.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, I'm voting to defer it.
Defer. Thank you. And Matthew Hicks to defer as well. Thank you, Chair. Just waiting on one vote.
Councillor Matheson, do you want to do it verbally?
No.
You got on. Great, well done.
Thank you, Chair. I can now confirm that all votes have been received, and that is a unanimous vote to defer the application.
Okay. We don't like to defer because we've all gathered to make a decision. So I know the applicants come here, but we do like to get all the information to make that decision. So thank you for joining us. The next item on the agenda is, do we have any site inspections requests that need to be reported to the committee?
None requested, Chair.
We close the meeting at 11:43, and thank you for all coming back for Council Chambers Day. It's lovely to see everyone's faces again.